right, hello everyone. Welcome again to our in-house audience. And at this time, I'd also like to welcome our online audience. I'm Jessie Bush. I run the Conversations program for the SAG Foundation. Tonight, we are thrilled to have the cast and also executive producers of TNT's new hit show, Falling Skies, joining us this evening. At this time, I'd like to have you please join me in giving a warm welcome to our moderator this evening from TV Guide magazine, Michael Schneider.
Hey everyone. That was a Mac. All right. There we go. Hello everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for everyone watching in the comfort of your own home. Welcome to Falling Skies, which just, by the way, received its second season order. So congratulations to everyone involved. Let's introduce the panel right now. First up, the executive producer and also the co-head of DreamWorks Television, Mr. Darryl Frank. Next up, we got the outlaw, John Pope, also known as Colin Cunningham. I hope he brought the wig. Next up, she's the pediatrician that you'd most like to be at your side in the event of an alien invasion, Ms. Moon Bloodgood. He is the American history professor who's now a big-time soldier, Tom Mason. Ladies and gentlemen, Noah Wyle. And he plays Tom's elder son, Hal, Drew Roy. And she plays the badass Margaret, Sarah Carter. And last but not least, the executive producer, Mr. Mark Verheiden. All right, thanks everyone for coming. I guess for starters, let's start with Noah. Talk about the project, Aliens. What was it about this that drew you in and sort of got you hooked?
Hey everybody, thank you very much for coming tonight. I got sent the script from TNT, who I've built up this really good relationship with over the last couple of years. And they'd sent me a couple different pilot scripts, and I'd sort of stayed away from episodic TV after doing ER for a while. And this was a chance to work with TNT again. It was a chance to work with Steven Spielberg and DreamWorks again. It was a chance to play a very different, very physical, very dynamic type character, and to look heroic to my 8-year-old son. So it all seemed to be like a good bet.
Was there a conversation particularly with Steven that sort of convinced you, or what?
Well, he was one of the executive producers on ER, so we go back a ways. And while his involvement was sort of intermediate, it was intermittent. Every time that he was around, it was like getting a film school education, just standing at his elbow or sitting at his lunch table. So there was no significant single conversation. It was just the chance to sort of be at that lunch table again.
And Moon, you know a thing or two about post-apocalyptic settings. What was it about this project that drew you in?
At first, I definitely was a little hesitant because I'd done some science fiction, and I think like anyone, you want to sometimes do something different. And then I read it a second time, and it was such a basic story, just about a family. And it seemed like that was the primary focus, and the aliens and the science fiction aspect was a secondary thing. So I loved Bob Rodat's work, and I just sat with it, and it felt really true and honest, and it's about a family. So I was excited to work with Noah and Spielberg and everyone involved. So I was excited.
And going down the group, Colin, you've done a ton of sci-fi, actually, just looking at your credits. Is that something that you kind of naturally gravitate to? Is it something that people just sort of recognize you now as someone who can, kind of play a post-apocalyptic baddie, or what's?
Well, I've been very fortunate. I mean, I really have. I think by virtue of just the fact that I was living in Vancouver for so long, and there was just a lot of sci-fi that shot there, so it wasn't necessarily something that well, of course I wanted to do it, but it wasn't like sci-fi and me had this connection, although I love the genre. It was more the fact that I was in Vancouver, and there was Stargate and a bunch of other different types of shows and stuff were shooting there. I think the refreshing thing for me with regards to Falling Skies was, again, what Moon said. Yes, it is a sci-fi genre, but it's about people. It's about family. It's about trying to do your best in a horrific situation. And I think there's even dialogue that Tom Mason's character says in terms of just like the Nazis and the French Resistance kind of thing. And that's kind of how I saw it, and I thought, wonderful. This is very, very cool. I'm just proud and grateful to have even had a place there. It's been great.
And going down the row, Drew, you also have a kind of an interesting resume. Among the things you most recently did was Hannah Montana.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand with science fiction.
So, I mean, you've done hour-longs as well, but talk about going from, a situation comedy to doing something so intense as this show.
Yeah, it was definitely a good change of pace. I wouldn't change anything. I started out being able to work, so that was great. But actually, when this project came along, I just went through the audition process just like I would for anything else. And it, got down to the end and booked it, and it was definitely good to be going in that direction. The Hannah Montana stuff was fun, but...
Well, didn't you say it was either Billy Ray Cyrus or Steven Spielberg?
That was it.
What are we gonna do?
By the way, Colin, that wig that you wear, very Billy Ray Cyrus oriented. So. And Sarah, talk about what was it about this project and sort of coming in, getting to pay sort of a tough as nails chick.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely the character drawing me into this project. So, in line with what everyone else is saying, this is first and foremost a show about what it is to be human. And Greg Beeman actually thought of me for the role. I'd worked with him previously on Smallville. And it was just exciting to be considered for such a strong female character after the other characters I've played, which are that they're not as tough. Hi. Are we having a moment?
I'm trying to think of a follow-up for that, but
Okay.
well, let's talk about the show, and Mark and Darryl kind of chime in and talk about sort of the origin of this. Obviously aliens are a well that have been dipped into many times through the years, including by Mr. Spielberg many times himself. What was sort of the thought process in this show and sort of coming up with something that felt different and sort of had a unique sort of take on the whole alien invasion mythos?
Well, I mean, just starting, the most important thing for Stephen was that he's done this genre before. How do you do it differently? How do you reinvent it? And I think the starting point was doing it in a way 6 months after the invasion as opposed to showing the actual invasion, and then getting into what he does best, which is the human aspect of it, and the relatable part of it, which is why we all thought Noah was so great for it, is sort of that everyman quality. What would you do? Are you going to be the person that's going to take up arms? Are you going to be the person that runs for the hills or protects your family in a different way and doesn't go with the group? And that was sort of the thing that Stephen always really responded to, was like, let's take a family, put them in the middle of this thing, and then see what happens. And that was sort of what we started with. And then we tried to sort of surround the show with, from Bob Rodat, who had done Saving Private Ryan, and he was a history buff, just sort of take those touchstones and then bring in people to surround on the writing staff with. We got people from Heroes and Lost and Battlestar Galactica and all the best sort of sci-fi shows to sort of beat it out from there. And Mark came in and just knocked it out of the park for the first season and ran the room.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to come in after the pilot, so I got to see how great that was. And as soon as I saw that, I knew I wanted to be involved in the show. And I think what attracted me to it, I've done a lot of science fiction too, but it's always about what are the people, who are the characters, how interesting are they, and the situations they're in. And it's interesting, we didn't even talk about a lot of science fiction films in the room, which early on had Graham Yost and Melinda Sue Taylor, who was on Lost. But we talked a lot about French Resistance and Saving Private Ryan and movies that were about people under siege and trying to survive. And so those were the sort of mandate, I think, thing we walked into this with, as opposed to the science fiction part, which frankly was already set up in there and we could explore once because it was already set up.
And talk about sort of balancing that, giving sci-fi fans enough sci-fi to come back each week, but at the same time, going after that audience, especially on a network like TNT, which focuses more on character-driven drama, giving them enough of that, enough of the family storylines to kind of balance it out so everyone's happy.
Yeah, I think we really wanted to make sure that the characters came first. Again, having worked on other science fiction, you can have all the bells and whistles in the world, but if you don't have a compelling story and interesting characters, none of that matters. So you can spend a lot of money on effects. And we have a couple shows that are very light in effects. And actually, I think one of those shows works the best of all of them. So we have such a great cast and just a great, compelling world to play in that the science fiction is great. And I love science fiction. I love skitters. I love mechs, monsters, all that stuff. But the fun of this is how do people respond to that? How do they deal with that? And try to be true to that.
And how do dynamics in families change, and how do you go from your 16-year-old being a 16-year-old boy to having to become a man and pick up a gun, and what happens when your 8-year-old wants to pick up a gun, and that's sort of the thing that we really responded to, was sort of getting into all of those interpersonal dynamics and the family dynamics, and just sort of exploring the human angle of it all.
Just to add to that, one of the cool things I remember when I was first reading the scripts, it was like, wow, this is some dark stuff. Because there's the scene, I believe that the episode's already aired, so I'm not giving anything away, but it's where Tom Mason says, we're not shooting kids. Well, what do? You've literally got kids are showing up, children that have guns, and they're shooting at you, and it's a matter of life and death. What do you do? And I thought, man, those are some serious decisions to make. And I thought this show's really, really cool. It's not afraid to ask those kinds of questions. So I thought this is awesome.
Yeah, what was fascinating about that scene too is one of the other characters says, "Shoot him," and you kind of, to some degree, you kind of agree with them. Like, these kids have guns.
It makes sense. Someone's going to die here. Who's it going to be? And yet you're hoping and praying that you can find a way out of this horrific situation. What do you do?
And then Tom comes back and says, "They're kids," and then as a viewer, you're watching, you're like, holy shit, I'm just as bad as So Noah and Moon, I'm especially curious about both of your characters have suffered massive loss, but we actually didn't see that. So talk about sort of the inspiration for have the writers sort of filled you in a little bit more on what actually happened, or did you have to kind of create this history in your own mind, and sort of how did you attack that?
Well, it was a little bit of both. I, like a lot of actors, I like to do character backstories before I start, whether it's applicable or noticeable or, even germane is sort of beside the point. It's part of the process that I enjoy. But it was particularly significant to do so on a job like this, where you have to start off having lived a life and then lost that life, and being true to that level of grief that everybody's sustaining on this show. But it sort of works both ways, in the sense that you become aligned with the writers and you start to tell them a little bit about the character work that you've done, and suddenly a detail will really ring true and get incorporated into a storyline. So it kind of worked both ways. There were definitely things that I brought up that I thought would be interesting wrinkles to add to scenes. And so, where it starts and where it ends becomes kind of vague after a while.
And when I started, I was supposed to be an artist, and then it got changed to me being a doctor. So, and we did.
Amazing what you could do in ADR.
We shot the pilot, and I had to say that's my piece, me being the artist, and then that's my husband's piece. So I had to kind of go. I just switched gears. I originally had a daughter, then I had a son. I mean, things just change in TV. I tried to do some of my homework and work on what I'm bringing, because you do have this whole past, and it's 6 months after, and I'd lost my husband and my child, and I guess you have to bring that character's pain and kind of live that through the eyes of your character.
And in some ways, that's true with every character. I mean, Sarah, obviously, we kind of have a little better understanding on sort of what went on with Colin and his thugs. But at the same time, we're still learning about that. And, with Colin, there's still a little bit of a mystery to your character, and what his motivations are. Are you guys sort of learning as this is going along, or do you sort of have a better idea of where your characters are going?
You take that, I'll follow up.
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I definitely came in with my backstory, and it is also unfolding. Margaret's mysterious, and in a lot of ways she's as mysterious to me as she is to you, which is a delightful opportunity as an actor to be a part of. But yeah, she obviously has, told her story, as we've seen, and that gave me a lot to work with.
I remember when I read that stuff, I thought, whoa, this is some heavy stuff. And exactly how bad is Pope? Because there are some things left unsaid, or exactly what did happen. I personally made the choice, or just never saw that Pope really had anything physically to do with that. I think if he could have stopped it, he would have, because I think that's a Pope thing. That's just kind of crossing the line. But that said, I think he was most certainly aware of it or knew about it. And but that's also the interesting thing about the show is that war creates very strange bedfellows. You know what I mean? And it's still about survival, and you know what I mean. So you got to keep moving on. So yeah. But I'm curious in terms of the writing and just where that particular arc is going to go. I know it was almost at the end of the season when you and I actually had a few words. Our characters had a few words, and that was good for me. I kept waiting for something like that to happen, and it was short, but it was powerful, I thought.
Is Pope a good person, though? I don't know.
No,
I think he's
I don't think he is. I think Pope's arc is going to be about that big.
Are you good or are you bad? You're so bad.
So Mark and Darryl, and you guys all should chime in as well. Talk about sort of the decision to sort of focus on the children and where the idea of the harness came from, and sort of it's sort of a fascinating choice to sort of talking earlier about killing kids and sort of the scene where one of the skidders actually seems to be almost nurturing towards these kids. It's sort of something that, again, in the whole alien invasion, past storylines, past features and TV shows, we haven't seen a lot of that. So talk about that decision.
Well, the harnesses were part of in the pilot, which Bob Rodat wrote, but I think as the show evolved, we started thinking internally about what we wanted to do with these Skidder characters, because one thing I really liked about the design from the pilot was that these are not your standard aliens. These are not guys you can negotiate with. You can't walk up and say, we give, okay? So, but then where do you take them? And so the harnesses and why they're putting them on the children and the reasons for that are all things we discussed a lot in the writer's room. And you start getting clues to what they're actually doing as the series goes on. I think, the choice to use children, I don't know what Bob Rodat thought, but to me it's just you're attacking our most vulnerable spot. And it's, it's a terrible, terrible thing for them to have done. So it's just a very anguishing, it's just a very hard thing for our guys to get past, even as we learn more about the Skidders.
And the original idea for the harnesses came from Stephen, and the ideas to put them on kids came from Stephen, and his whole thought process, and that was that, the kids are, their minds aren't totally formed yet. They're still, able to be controlled. So his whole thing was they're going to harness these kids, they're going to use the kids, and they're going to kill all the adults. And he just thought that was a great sort of jumping off point for it. And the whole idea of sort of what happens when you get the harness off, he just thought was a great sort of series-long drive and mystery. And they have some great reveals that you'll see in later episodes about that.
To interrupt for a second, I've been asked to ask you to turn your cell phones off. I guess we're having feedback on the live stream audio.
There's a birthday in the house, right?
Exactly. But if you could, I guess there's a problem with the audio. One of the quotes, I think it was from the last episode, or maybe it was from the one before, where one of the characters says, All right, people on stage, let's do it. Of course, the bad guy was at fault.
Not good. Pope's not good.
One of the characters says at one point, luck's been in really short supply lately, which is sort of the understatement of the century on this show. Is there any hope for our heroes? Can these small groups ever effectively attack aliens? Is this a show about survival, or is it a show about resistance? And sort of maybe curious what the actors think, and also obviously the producers.
I think that's what you think when you have that private moment, but when you're interacting with everyone, you want to try to rise above that and stay positive. In doing backstory and prep for the show, I would read about like POW survivors and what they went through in the camps and whatnot. And by and large, if you just kind of succumb to that situation, it's just too much to handle. So you have to kind of rise above it. And so that's the way I tried to play Hal, was to go above and beyond as opposed to just dwelling in it.
I would think for Pope, it's the exact opposite. I think Pope, what gives him his freedom is that he has absolutely no expectation that he'll live any more than another day, maybe. So I think that's his freedom. It's not about hope for tomorrow. As far as he's concerned, there is no tomorrow. And so therefore, I think that it's a big motivator in terms of everything that he does.
I think there's a lot of hope in the show. Each episode tries to have this very odd balance between the very obvious cons to the situation, the fact that these characters are living under this level of threat and in this high state of deprivation. But there's a lot more kind of insidious and subtle pros to the situation as well, which is the authenticity of relationships suddenly becomes a lot stronger. Kids are forced to use their imaginations to play. There's not so many distractions with modern conveniences, and there's a sort of return to your word is your bond kind of 19th century mentality that I think are actually advantages to these characters in the present state that they're in. So I see, it's both a show about resistance and about creating, I said this last night, what the next template for the next civilization is going to be, and hopefully retaining only the best and discarding what was superfluous or unnecessary.
We obviously see Tom and Ann clasp hands at one point in this past episode.
Yes.
And I know I've heard you guys, and also I've heard the producers talk in the past about taking it slow. Obviously, both characters have just experienced massive loss, so it's not, you can't just shove these two characters together immediately. But talk about the evolving relationship between the two of you.
In the pilot we set up that there's this chemistry between these two characters, and it's not that we didn't try. We did. We'd write scenes where I was on guard duty and she'd bring me a sandwich, and
That's the kind of girl I am.
But we never really shot them. They never got past the table read-through stage, because as soon as you had an interpersonal scene that was intimate, you immediately dissipated the tension that you've been trying all episode and all season to create. So to try and figure out a way where these two characters could have that private moment became really difficult. So it's really a relationship that plays out across crowded rooms, with two very busy people wishing things were different and feeling a sort of interesting pull that by the end of the season, when there is a moment of intimacy, it feels very well earned and 10 times as romantic in my opinion, because we did pace it out. And I don't think anybody would really want these characters to get together until they've had the funerals that they have to bury the lives that they led in order to go forward in any kind of meaningful way.
Yeah, I remember, I didn't know if that was your idea, but I remember being told that part of the reason it was being stretched out was because you wanted to respect the fact that I had lost my husband, he had lost his wife, his kids are still there. I think these are characters that have boundaries, that really are healthy people in this really unhealthy circumstance. And they're not gonna just jump into something like that without respecting their past. So I thought that was your idea. I don't know where that came from.
Did you like that idea?
I did. I agreed with it, Noah. I did.
Actually,
I
in
wanted to get a little
season-
bit more,
In season 2, Pope brings Tom Mason a sandwich. So we're working on that.
Pope is not a good guy.
We're working on that.
And you're gonna lace it with
Tender
poison.
moment.
He just wants to be good. Pope's not a good person.
we talked about Spielberg earlier, but I'm curious, sort of, and maybe the actors talk about how involved he's been in terms of, has he given you much direction? Do you feel like, your character is different because of him? What's that relationship been like?
Well, he gave me a prototype character. He thought I should really take a look at Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan. That was sort of the character he had in his head where I should start. But I think Mark and Darryl can speak more to his directed development. I know it to have been extreme, both in the shaping of the original pilot script and certainly through the casting process. He showed up on set when we shot, which was a huge morale boost for the cast and crew. Watched all the dailies that we filmed, made editorial suggestions on all the episodes, designed the aliens and spaceships with the post-production house that we hired. His fingerprints are all over it.
Yeah, he does not put his name on something that he doesn't get intimately involved with, and he literally picked, production designer, costume designer, cinematographer. Every cast member on this stage he was involved with, and looks at multiple people and asks tough questions and sends you back to the drawing board when you have to go back to the drawing board, and sees things that all of us don't see. As much as I've worked with him for 16 years and know his taste, but there never ceases to surprise us. And when the writers go in for season 1 and season 2, before we start the season, we go in and we lay out the entire arc of the season for him, and we call it, he sprinkles his pixie dust on it. You always go in there and come out with 10 ideas they could be little ideas for the specific episode, a detail here, a line. I mean, he reads the scripts and literally gives, dialogue notes on, instead of them saying this, they should say this. The skitter shouldn't be called this. And he knows the genre so well, and he knows story and character so well that he gives a lot of great notes, and is not always speaking to the actors on a daily basis, but is calling the directors and giving them a lot of sort of guidance as well. So he's very involved.
Is it tough to get much story done in 10 episodes? That obviously is the plan for next year as well, 10 episodes. Does that force you to sort of rush things, or?
I don't know.
No, I think actually it was kind of great in a way. It's like doing a mini series. And I think we knew where we wanted to start. We knew we wanted to end, and so filling in all that was the fun of it, and exploring these characters. What's great about TNT, working with TNT, was the emphasis on character and on making sure that we could live with these people, and that's great. We got to slow the story down and really say, okay, what's going on with Tom right now? What's going on with Pope, with his sandwich? What's going on with everybody? It's great to be able to not have to be sort of headlong running all the time, and you can really live in these characters. But knowing you have an end point, then you can work toward that. I think it's great. I've done 22 episodes, and I know Noah has too. That's a lot of episodes.
Yeah. It's much better to work this way. First of all, not the least of which is it affords you a quality of life that you don't really get when you're working 70 to 80-hour weeks, 9 months a year. But you also don't know where you're going to finish up at the beginning of a network TV schedule. You do it usually in 7-episode blocks, 3 of them. So you know mini arcs, but you don't really know where you're going to end up. And having the ability to really craft out a whole season and know how to modulate that in terms of your performance and in terms of the relationships is really quite a luxury.
Also, I think in terms of the writing, people don't often really think about it, but to write an episode that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then next episode is a completely different middle, and it's not easy to do, but it's a lot easier than not doing that, and instead taking those and stretching it out over an entire season is not an easy thing to do. So I mean, I take my hat off to all these guys in terms of the writing team. They've just done an amazing job.
So let's go down the row real quick and hear sort of either your favorite scene, your favorite moment so far in the series. So go left to right. Colin, you want to start with you?
Yeah, I'd say right now, to be perfectly honest with you. What I think is kind of interesting or special about this particular screening, last night we did one over at the Paley Center. It was primarily, some fans of the show, which was exciting and wonderful. But for me, just as on a personal note, I can only assume that many of you out there are actors. So it's nice to sit in front of an audience of your peers, and the fact that you guys have shown up and found worth in what we've done as actors actually means a lot to me, because I've spent a lot of time in the audience asking questions or coming to certain panels and stuff like that. So
Really?
Yeah, it's the truth. So I remember when I first started out acting here in Hollywood, or not acting here, in Hollywood. I would literally, and I'm not an exaggeration, this is a true story. I used to go to the back of Ralph's or Safeway, and I would cut out 8x10 pieces of cardboard out of fruit boxes so my headshot wouldn't bend in the mail, you know. And so
crazy.
And I always think, you know, whenever a casting director or an agent would pull it out, it would have a dull pineapple in one hand and my headshot in the other. So for me, it really is. It's humbling and it's special. And just thanks for having us all today. Thank you.
No, but you really are super dedicated. And I remember when I worked with you and you had to shove me in the scene, and I think you took a little bit too many liberties there. But I forgive you.
He got a hold of my hair one time pretty hard.
I know, Pope's intense. So are we supposed to talk about our favorite scene in the...
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Or our favorite life moment that you're having right now? Because I don't have a lot. I don't have a lot to work with.
You could go with scene. We'll give Colin his,
And not to be
This
redundant,
moment.
because they all had to hear this last night, but I do have a favorite scene, and it was when Anne breaks down. There's all these pictures up of the kids that are missing, and my son is deceased, and I don't have anything. I wasn't able to keep anything, and I just feel like an awful mother, and my character is always just so selfless, and she's like the woman you want to be. It's never about her. It's not about what she's been through. It's always about everyone else, and she's so giving in that way. But the scene, she falls apart, and Noah was there, and my hand's bloody from killing a skidder, and I place my hand up against a newspaper article that's on the wall, and you see the imprint. And Noah wrote a little note and said, "This is when Tom falls in love with Anne," and he left it in my trailer. Because it was very sweet. So that was a really nice moment. Yeah. So
It's a really good scene.
it was really intense, and it's intense because you're really crying, and I remember people coming up like, "Are you okay?" Because you go through this thing, and you were really great and supportive.
I got chills when I read that scene when you put your hand there because that's all you had to offer. I got chills when you did it. And I did say that last night. That was one of my favorite scenes too. But I'm going to switch it up tonight.
Yeah, it's okay. I forgive you.
Special answer for the SAG crowd.
I liked fighting the skidder in the tunnel. And I liked it especially because my 8-year-old son was on set that night, and we were shooting in this, asbestos-filled tunnel and God knows where. And he's sitting in my chair, and he's watching the monitor. And I'll take this memory to my grave because I'm wailing away on it. And I go over and I say, "What'd you think, Owen?" And he goes, on the last take you hit him 5 times. On this one you hit him 6. 6 works better than 5. And I swear to God, he says, "On the last hit, you're holding the gun up too high. It's not staying in the picture. If you hold it over your shoulder, it'll stay in the frame." And every head goes, "What?" And I went back to work, as I do.
I hear he's directing episode 2 next season.
Yeah, he's got a 3-picture deal with DreamWorks now. I can't get him on the phone.
Well, what I found pretty exciting being on an action show like this, doing the action was pretty incredible. The opening sequence of the pilot, we had all these cars flipped over and the buildings were burned, and we were about to shoot this the scene where we're running in, and basically everything around you is going to blow up. And they kind of tell us that, all right, this is going to blow up, that's going to blow up, this is what can go wrong. They tell you everything that can go wrong. So it's probably like 3 in the morning, maybe later, 4 in the morning. And we're about to do it. They've wet down the asphalt. And I'm pumped because I'm about to maybe die. And so I'm leading the group, and Noah's going to be behind me, and then we have the DP behind him, and we're going to call action. We only want to shoot this thing one time, so if we mess it up, it's somebody's fault. So you've got that in the back of your mind. And so we call action, and like I said, I was so pumped that I kind of slipped and fell, and then Noah falls on me, the cinematographer falls on him. They're saying, "Don't blow, don't blow, don't blow." So thank goodness nothing happened. I got a little scar from it. That's a kind of little keepsake.
Workman's comp.
There were so many good moments. But I think my favorite moment was pulling off the line, "Comfortable as a credit card." With Moon. When I was teaching Anne Glass how to shoot a gun, there were a few lines that were Oh no, they were just hard to deliver because Margaret was, she's so reserved, and it was the first opportunity to have her laugh and have a friendly moment. The first, genuine moment of connection with another woman, and that was great. It was fun to laugh as Margaret.
And I believe, just to chime in, that we thought the joke was a little on the nose and just a little silly, so we started laughing, and then they kept that in the scene. Do you remember that? Like,
that's what. Thank you for saying that. I'm squirming because I'm right beside Mark. So I'm like.
On the nose.
I mean,
it was on the nose. You said.
But it was fun. It was. It
was really fun. It worked. You're a genius.
We can talk about her arc tomorrow for next season.
So speaking of next season, let's talk about the rest of this year and then going into next year. How much more are we going to learn about sort of the origins? Will there be a point where we flash back and see a little bit of kind of the first invasion? And is the universe going to expand? Are we going to eventually sort of start to learn what's going on in other parts of the world? And will we start to see the characters go beyond sort of the Boston city limits?
Well, we don't want to spoil anything. So I mean, I think the most important thing is that, unlike Lost, and we all loved Lost, we don't want to frustrate the audience. So we want to sort of tease things out there and then answer them and set up mysteries and then pay them off. And we do that a lot in the later episodes. And, I don't really want to say much more than that, but, you will get answers, and it will be satisfying. And we end the season in an incredible cliffhanger that sort of gives us a great place to jump off for season 2.
And season 2, the humans win, and then everybody just kind of hangs around.
Yeah.
It becomes a procedural cop drama at that point. The show's also moving production. It's moving to Vancouver. For the actors, is that sort of nice to be in the same time zone? Does that help you guys out a lot personally? Talk about that.
Toronto was great. Toronto treated us extremely well. We are going back to work in October, which makes shooting in all practical locations like we did in the first season, weather makes that difficult. So it'll be wet, but it won't be cold. I've worked in Vancouver before. It's a beautiful place. I'm looking forward to going back. And yeah, as the father of 2 kids, being in the same time zone and 2.5 hours away from them is huge for me.
As opposed to, what was it, from Toronto? 6 or...
Well, it's like
lot.
6, but you got, it's passport control and all that too.
Yeah.
You still have to go through passport control and things.
And you get
I'm just
stopped a
going to
lot,
talk to
right?
myself for a second. I'm going to bring my...
But it seems more intense in Toronto.
So I'm going to open it up to questions, but first there's the burning question that I've had from a couple episodes ago. So you've got a skidder, you've captured him, and then you have no security on him. What's going on there? There's the big hole in the cage, and half the time there's no one looking after the skidder. It's sort of like, oh yeah, we got the skidder.
No, there's guards posted outside the lab. They're just not allowed inside. They come rushing in a moment of need, but they're posted outside the doors. They're really big too.
Well,
That's right.
We had to kill Steven Weber some way, man.
I was going to say, poor Steven Weber. Let's get some questions from the audience. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm curious, aside from creating a backstory, I'm wondering as actors if you have any sort of input into your character's development in terms of the writing or in terms of just basically how they react in certain situations.
Someone else want to start? I didn't really get that involved in like getting in the writing room and throwing in ideas around, but when we were on set, there was always a writer, and they were always open to any suggestions you had, which was nice. They were small little improvs they would be open to. I know some of the other guys had a little more input. I think at one point our script started coming a little later because we kept saying so much.
I got to design tattoos. Yeah, that was pretty cool. Thank you, TNT.
Got another question from the crowd from Laura Antol, who asks, what's been the most challenging aspect of performing on the series? Is it working with the aliens? What's been sort of the toughest part for you guys?
Being dressed like it's wintertime, but it's like ridiculously hot and humid.
And I'd say it's because it's a TV schedule. You got to do everything with 1-2 takes. I mean, you may have 200 people in the background, and you got the trucks, and you got the wardrobe, and the makeup, and the armor, and everybody's got to move and coordinate. And it's just you just have 3 lines, but there's 200 people in the background. You blow your line, we got to reset, and it's an hour before you get to do it again. So that's tough, and the pressure can most certainly be on.
Is it green screen or what's how are the effects?
It's a little bit of everything. When we shot the pilot, we didn't have any of the digital graphics done yet, so it was tennis balls on sticks and pieces of tape. And then when we went to series, we built a suit and had a puppeteer in the suit and had other puppeteers working the various legs. And both have their own built-in challenges to them, reacting to something that's not there, especially when there's multiple characters in the same frame. Can be difficult to get a certain line of continuity and performance. And then the physical limitations of a guy in a suit that apparently deprived him of oxygen if he wore it for like more than 5 minutes. So this poor guy would lose 10 pounds a day wearing it. And we could only really shoot in 5 and 6 minute intervals before we had to give him a break. And
But for off-camera, they use a Kermit puppet, so we can just, it's a lot cheaper to do.
So those days with the puppet are really slow, and they're really about just getting the footage you need. We need this shot, we need this shot, we need this shot. So that scene in the tunnel was really a game of inches and really made in post-production, not on the set.
How many of you are including a skidder in your holiday cards this year?
Are we allowed? Isn't that on lockdown, trademark, DreamWorks?
Another question from the audience right here.
Your father-son relationship is amazing, and I'm just wondering how close to when you auditioned, like, did you get to read with him, and then how much time did you actually develop that before you started shooting?
Yeah, one of my favorite stories to tell, I told it last night, was when we were going through the audition process. I came in one time, I think it was the 3rd callback. It turned out to be a chemistry read, but I didn't know Noah was going to be there. And so we got to throw around a couple ideas before we jumped into the scene and kind of say, where we thought the scene was going to go and just, where you were coming from. And like I'm sure we all know in this room, you don't really do all the action when you're doing a scene in an audition. So at this one point, he's supposed to throw me a clip of ammunition. And so I'm just pretending like, it'll be right here. We'll see that I caught it. But he reached into his pocket and grabbed his cell phone and tossed it to me. So I catch his phone, and I'm like, wow.
But you answered it, though. I don't know if that was a good
call. I'm used to being the young guy in the cast. So I knew that line of demarcation was out there, that one day I'd be playing the father of a teenager. But I have to say, there was a moment in the pilot where I was like, doesn't this really look ridiculous to anybody? Why is nobody saying this looks ridiculous? Am I the only one that thinks this is? But
especially when you shaved your beard. You looked so much younger.
I look like him.
Yeah.
Except older.
You just keep telling yourself you were a teenage father.
But we did spend a lot of time together. And we had the luxury, too. I mean, we shot the pilot 2 years ago. And that was a very finite and short story we told. We actually shot only a 1-hour pilot. And then we had a year before we went to series. And we smashed the 1-hour pilot with our first episode that we shot and made it a 2-hour premiere. So we've now known each other for 2 years and have had a lot of downtime to sort of get to know each other and figure out our rhythms. And so, I'm amazed at how well it reads in the pilot, which was 2 years ago, because I feel like it's a relationship that keeps getting stronger the more time we spend around each other.
What's that like to shoot a pilot and then come back to it a year later? Do you sort of have to
Well, to touch on what we were talking about, Mr. Spielberg's involvement, we actually went back and did a whole sequence of reshoots that were really extensive. We basically reshot the whole last third of the pilot, that whole action that takes place in the Shop Mart store. And he, if I'm not mistaken, he drew out the storyboards himself for what he thought we needed to do to accomplish this sequence and have it have the right tension. And we basically put those pictures up on a gigantic card and went, okay, shoot that frame, that frame, that frame, that frame. And then when we cut it all together, it's this great Spielbergian siege.
It was pretty great. It was like we had 54 shots on a board. We had a certain amount of time to do it, and we literally just would do them one at a time and just cross them off and go to the next one. And it was pretty major because we were doing a lot of CG shots. And a lot of things that we had to match to the original material, and it was fun. And it was one of those things where the director came in. He had his boards, and he said, "Look, I've got this many boards," and he brought Stephen through every single shot, and Stephen sort of suggested, okay, in between this shot and that shot, maybe you try something like this, and it was just a great collaboration, and it ended up really sort of plussing up the final end of our pilot, the last act and the resolution, because it didn't work when we originally did it. And that was one of the things where TNT is so great, which Steven said, I think we can make this better. They were willing to pick it up as is, and he's like, it's good, but it's not great. I want it to be great. And same thing with, the visual effects. We got, literally today, we just sort of signed off on the final visual effect for the final piece of the show. And he got really involved in it and redesigned stuff to make it better. So.
But to answer your question, it's both. It's one, you get the luxury of being able to go back and fix it because there's so much time that elapses. And then on the other hand, it's incredibly frustrating because your friends and family are like, what did you do up in Canada? Am I ever going to see it?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
No offense to TNT, but I don't understand. I would assume that Steven Spielberg would go to any network and get a show put on network TV. And there's nothing adult or anything about it. Why wasn't it on network or pitched to network?
All because of relationships. I mean, for Steven and for us, it's you go where you like to work and where the people respect what you do. And there's certain places that let you do your job and trust you to do your job, and there's certain places that don't. And we had a great experience with Michael Wright and TNT on this miniseries we did called Into the West. And so when he came back to us and said, hey, we did this thing that was a limited series, why don't we, and we spent all this time on it and now it's done, why don't we do something that's going to live on forever, that can get many seasons out of it? He's like a producing partner for us. So it was all about the relationship. It was, it's more fun for us to work there, even though it's not a broadcast network. It still gets a huge audience. So it's sort of in between doing cable and doing, or doing premium cable and doing broadcast. And their shows are beating a lot of the networks straight up on the nights that they're airing. So it was really about that and about the marketing muscle they said they would put behind it. They used the basketball they promised they'd use the basketball to promote us, and they did. And it's just a relationship.
Be a very different kind of show too. First off, you wouldn't be doing just 10 episodes.
Right.
Yeah. More questions? Yes.
I think it's great asking the question, the favorite scene, because I too thought the hand was very powerful and totally felt that. And my question is, why do we not identify what type of cancer she has? Because I immediately wanted to know, because cancer is so prevalent in so many lives, so the specificity why that wasn't included.
You asking me?
You're the only writer.
You gave her cancer.
I frankly don't remember why we made that decision. I think, in a way, Margaret's trying to get past it. So to get really specific, I mean, that whole sequence where she's refusing to say why she was in the hospital, how she knew all about the hospital, this is clearly something she was trying to put behind her. So, I mean, to get into the real specifics of it was this, and I was in bed for months and this and that, it didn't, to me, I guess it just didn't feel right. It was, I'm going to tell you why I knew all that stuff, and then I'm done talking about it. But I don't know how you felt about it.
No, that's exactly it. I think it was difficult enough to even talk to Hal in that moment. I wanted to maintain a certain lightness, so evading any details, it was part of that.
That was one of the first scenes you shot too, wasn't it? I think it was like.
It was the second.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Which
was good.
Yeah.
It was nice for me to have to explore what it would be like to reach out and open up.
I think in the first draft it was just a bladder infection, and then they changed it.
Smoke weed. Makes it better.
Have you guys ever sort of, I imagine as you're maybe sort of shooting a scene, or you're thinking about your characters, what would you do personally? Would you be one of the fighters, or would you be one of the folks back at the camp making dinner? What?
Fighter.
Fighter.
When it comes down to it, yeah, I'd be a fighter.
Whatever, I'd be a coward. I don't know. I think I would, and I'm getting, as I get older, I don't know. And I have posed that question, I've been asked that question, and I honestly think I would just be so overwhelmed and terrified. I don't think I would be as strong and as courageous. I think I would probably just hide and try to figure out how can I survive the longest without a confrontation from those crazy fucking things. I think I always play characters that are way more courageous than I am, which is the fun part of being an actor. You can pretend to be a badass.
I think I'd take my kids and head for the hills and stay away from crowds and cities.
Yeah. More questions? Yes.
The question about the skitters, I apologize, I've not seen the show until tonight. And I understand that they're not good, they're bad, but my heart kind of went out to them, especially in the scene where the kids were sleeping. And the one was rubbing your head, and I'm like, well, are they...
That's the first sort of humanizing moment that we've seen. So that is a bit of a reveal in that episode, that they have this side to them that we haven't seen yet that has a sort of nurturing quality to it.
So, and then, you know, you went to kill them.
I think Hitler had a puppy. I'll say that.
I found it very interesting. I'm like, well, there's got to be more. They can't all be bad. And for some of the scene that you're in with the skitter, it seemed like, to me, it was like kind of communicating. You're trying to communicate with it. But of course, across the line, you killed your friend, and you're like, no, this, I'm going to kill you. So it just felt like, when you try to communicate with it, is that, do you see that happening later on? Or is this
We don't want to give anything away, but I mean, the humanity is the important part of it. I mean, there was the part of the pilot where you didn't see it, but after they kill, they have this big battle, and after they kill it, there's literally a line in the script. It's like you see the humanity in its eyes, and that was a big thing we had with the visual effects companies. How do you sort of give this CG creature, and we actually built the creature so we can get it. How do you get the humanity in its eyes? And and then somebody says, I wonder what it's thinking, and then it dies, and Tom has his line, nothing now, and it's like, as human as it might seem, it's like, this thing's trying to kill my family, so I'm going to kill it.
Well, there's obviously still a lot of questions about Tom's son Ben, and sort of, he seems to have an affinity toward his former captors, and he doesn't seem to be altogether there anymore, and at some point, we're wondering, is he going to turn on his family and on his on humans? So I assume we'll see more.
There's a really good mythology that extends over several seasons that is very rich in detail about all of this. So we're all being really good not saying anything, because it's a really good sort of it's a good yarn.
How far has it been mapped out?
I was going to say those questions will be answered in season 7.
Well, we'll see you at Comic-Con 2019.
You could probably answer. There is a trajectory. There is an arc.
No, we definitely talked about it, and Bob Rodat wrote a Bible that had all sorts of information about where we wanted to go. The great thing about his Bible is that it tells you where he wants to go, but there's a lot of flexibility on how you get there. And that was the fun of working on, even on season 1, was the flexibility we had in basically getting to where we get at the end of the season, playing around with all the stuff, all the toys we had.
And giving answers. I mean, literally, you will have answers by the end of this season, by end of episode 10. You will have answers about the skitter. So it's not like you're going to have to wait and wait and wait. We're going to reveal things in episode 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You get a lot of answers about the skitters, why they're here, all that kind of stuff.
We had a question over here.
Oh, yeah, I feel kind of like a dick asking it, though. I kind of am a dick. And I'm here, for me, I'm a sci-fi actor, a sci-fi star, and a sci-fi fan. And I want to know who I should campaign for to get a meeting.
Exactly. Yeah.
I see these actors, and they always, skip shows. They do Star Trek. I was on Star Trek for a couple of years. And suddenly they pop into Stargate. And how do they do that? Do they have better agents than mine?
Well, Leslie Feldman is the head of casting for DreamWorks, so if you have an agent or a manager, just to have them get in contact with her, and we're putting together new casting directors for season 2 because we're moving to Vancouver, but we haven't hired them yet. We've identified.
You might want to move to Vancouver, apparently.
Yeah. That's actually a good one, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, in season 2, we actually have some really interesting things that come out with the kid fighters. So you're touching on things that are going to play out in season 2. So stay tuned.
It's the new kid series, Falling Skies Jr.
Yeah,
to Cartoon Network.
Yeah, the spinoff.
Yeah, exactly. Way back there.
Yeah, I'm wondering how the song Many Rivers to Cross made it into the episode. It comes from a scene from The Heart of the Gun that echoes the action in Tonight's Thing in a very Doom sort of way. But it's a 40-year-old movie, and a wonderful one. But I'm just wondering where that came from.
You want me to-
Yeah, you take it.
I'm only going to take it because Will's not here. You know, when you shoot a sequence like that, you don't know what the music's going to be because you don't know what you can afford. Everybody's kicking around ideas of what they think it should be. The actor, Will Patton, who I'm really sorry isn't here tonight because he's such an integral part of the show and he's such a really well-spoken guy who cares incredibly deeply about his work and his craft, had a particular piece of music in mind that he felt he was wanting to react to, so he played that music when the sequence was shot. And then a song was chosen, and you know, it was sort of an on-the-nose choice. It was one that is recognizable to a lot of people, and Will really didn't feel like it was right. And so, you know, it's funny. There was a sequence in the pilot where I pick up 2 books and I choose one that weighs less. And we shot that sequence without showing what the books were. And everybody wanted to know what the book was. Like, sometimes these little details become huge plot points. So we went back and filmed the titles. And in that way, this was a major topic of conversation. I'll let you take the rest.
It was a major topic, and there are clues to what the original song actually was still in the show. Which, so I don't know if I want to mention the original song, but Many Rivers to Cross is great, and I'm glad we picked it because I think it's a very ethereal, great sounding song for that moment, and it feels very Weaver. So,
But
I'm glad
it
we
speaks
changed
to your question before about, you know, how much do the actors get involved in their character, and for him that was a very, you know, it was important song because it spoke to sort of his relationship with his wife and all that kind of stuff. So he really thought about it a lot and had a very strong opinion about it. And when we put the original song in, campaigned very hard to get that original song out and succeeded. So
I think they also tried the Humpty Hump, and it just it didn't work at all.
Yeah. That's that'll be on the DVD, right? All right, I think we have time for one more question. Yes.
Hi. Okay. Amazing. Fascinating. And know you look for sure. No way can I conceive of you having a 20-year-old son.
He's 16, 17. Thank you.
My question is, I'm wondering what kind of responses you're getting male-wise, because to me, when you have this kind of notion of an alien, especially with dealing with America, dealing with foreigners and being at war, and the history of America, I would just, for many reasons, I wonder like how you guys as actors come. It seems like you've come to an unspoken agreement on who these aliens are, but I just wonder, since what your take on it is, what kind of responses have you been getting from like fans, or with regard to the aliens?
Wow.
Repeat the question, please.
Yeah. The question was what type of response have we had to the episodes and some of the themes that we delve into. Well, maybe I can answer. I could repeat it. I think science fiction works really, really, really well when it's metaphorical storytelling or allegorical storytelling. So I don't shy away from the fact that there's a huge political message in this. You could look at it as a historical allegory or a contemporary one, depending on your point of view. And I had the opportunity recently to go to Europe as this show was debuting in 75 countries, all roughly within the same night, which is also a really new thing. This became a global show really in 1 week. As opposed to the time delay you usually have to do. And getting the European perspective on this show, they thought it was really courageous. They thought we were basically showing great self-awareness by putting something this on the air.
Well, the moment where you guys compare, okay, so is it the Revolutionary War or is it the Europeans coming and destroying the Native Americans?
Mm-hmm.
That came on very early in the series, and it's something I think about almost every week when I'm watching the show, and we sort of are still learning what it's going to be. So, well, I think that does it. Thank you very much.